The water was scalding, steam rising like ghosts between them, and Kang Min-ho's voice cut through the heat with a command that made her hands shake. "Bathe me," he said, dark eyes locked on hers. $5,000 cash sitting on the marble counter like a test, like a trap, like the beginning of something that would ruin them both. Amara's heart slammed against her ribs because this wasn't just a job anymore. This was the moment everything she'd been running from caught up, and the most dangerous man in Seoul just made her an offer she couldn't refuse. Welcome to Story World, besties. Please like, share, and subscribe. 3 hours earlier, Amara had been scrubbing floors in the lobby of the Zenith Tower, invisible in her gray uniform, earbuds in, trying to forget that her visa was expiring in 2 weeks, and her savings account had exactly $417 left. Seoul had promised her a fresh start, a place where her past couldn't follow, where no one knew about the scandal that destroyed her family back in Atlanta, or the ex who'd made sure she'd never work in finance again. But fresh starts cost money, and cleaning offices at midnight barely covered rent in a closet-sized room she shared with 2 other women who spoke languages she was still learning. The elevator dinged. Amara didn't look up. Rich people came and went at all hours in buildings like this, and she'd learned early that eye contact invited questions she couldn't afford to answer. She pushed her cart toward the service hallway, but a voice stopped her cold. "You, the cleaner." The accent was thick, Korean shaped around English words, and it carried the kind of authority that made her spine straighten instinctively. Amara turned slowly. The man standing by the elevator was tall, maybe 6'1", with black hair styled back except for one piece that fell across his forehead. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than she'd made all year, and his face was the kind of beautiful that felt dangerous, sharp jawline, full lips, and eyes so dark they looked black in the hallway lighting. But it was the tattoo peeking above his collar, intricate lines that disappeared beneath expensive fabric, that made her pulse quicken with recognition. She'd seen enough crime dramas to know what those marks meant. "Yes, sir," she said carefully, keeping her voice neutral. He studied her for a long moment, his gaze traveling over her face, her curls pulled back in a practical bun, her curves that the shapeless uniform couldn't quite hide, and something shifted in his expression. Not lust exactly, but interest, the kind that felt like being seen through. "You work here every night?" he asked. "Monday through Friday, sir." "Alone?" The question should have scared her. Instead, it just made her tired. "The building's secure, I'm fine." A slight smile touched his mouth, barely there and gone. That wasn't concern, that was assessment. He pulled out a phone, typed something, then looked back at her. "What's your name?" Every instinct told her to lie. "Amara." "Korean name?" "No, sir, American." His eyebrow raised slightly. "You're far from home." "So are a lot of people." That made him pause. Then he stepped closer, and Amara caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something else, copper maybe, or iron. Blood. Her stomach dropped. "I need someone I can trust," he said quietly. "Someone who doesn't know who I am, doesn't work for my enemies, and won't ask questions." "I think you have the wrong person." "No," he said, "I don't." 15 minutes later, Amara stood in the private elevator that only went to the penthouse level, cash advance already transferred to her phone, watching the numbers climb with her heart in her throat. Kang Min-ho, he'd told her his name like it should mean something, and maybe it did to people who understood Seoul's underworld. But Amara had spent 6 months keeping her head down, and her ears closed to anything that sounded like trouble. Now trouble had found her anyway, and it was offering her $5,000 to help with something he wouldn't explain until they were alone. The elevator opened directly into his apartment. Amara stepped out and froze. Floor to ceiling, windows overlooked the Han River, city lights glittering like diamonds across black water. The space was massive, minimalist, all clean lines and expensive emptiness. No photos, no personal touches, just furniture that looked like art, and art that probably cost more than her life. "This way," Min-ho said, already walking toward a hallway. Amara followed, her footsteps silent on marble floors, her mind racing through escape routes and worst-case scenarios. He led her to a bathroom that was bigger than her entire apartment. The tub was sunken, black granite, already filling with steaming water. Expensive bottles lined the counter, and that's when she saw it. The money. 50 $100 bills, stacked neatly beside a first aid kit that was open, supplies scattered like someone had grabbed what they needed in a hurry. Min-ho turned to face her, and for the first time she noticed the blood, not a lot but enough. His shirt was torn slightly at the shoulder, and when he shrugged off his jacket she saw the wound, a cut clean and deliberate like someone had come at him with a blade. You're hurt, she said before she could stop herself. I'm aware. He started unbuttoning his shirt and Amara's face heated. Wait, what exactly do you want me to do? He paused, meeting her eyes. I need someone to clean the wound and help me bathe. I can't reach it properly myself, and I don't trust my own people not to finish the job. Finish what job? The one someone started 3 hours ago when they tried to kill me. The words hung in the air, casual and terrifying. Amara's hands clenched at her sides. You should go to a hospital. Hospitals ask questions. You're going to ask questions too, but you'll forget the answers the moment you leave here. That's what the $5,000 buys. Silence and skill. I'm not a nurse. You have hands, you're steady. That's enough. He pulled off his shirt completely, and Amara forgot how to breathe. His body was a canvas of ink and muscle, tattoos covering his chest and shoulders, dragons and Korean script and symbols she didn't understand. More scars too, old ones, layered beneath the art like a history written in violence. The fresh wound looked angry against all that marked skin. The water's ready, he said, nodding toward the tub. I'll pay you double if you don't make this difficult. Amara should have run, should have taken the advance and disappeared into Seoul's endless streets. But something in his voice, underneath the command and the cold authority, sounded like exhaustion, like loneliness, like the voice of someone who'd been strong for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone help. Triple, she heard herself say. Minho's eyes widened slightly. Then he laughed, a real sound that transformed his face into something younger, almost boyish. You negotiate with a man who just told you someone tried to kill him. You need me more than I need you right now. The truth settled between them. His smile faded, but something else replaced it. Respect, maybe, or the beginning of something more dangerous. Triple, he agreed. Now help me before I bleed on imported marble. Amara moved on autopilot, hands steadier than they should have been as she helped him into the water. He hissed when the heat hit his wound, muscles tensing, and she found herself murmuring reassurances she didn't know she remembered. Careful, I've got you, just breathe. The first aid kit had everything she needed. She cleaned the wound with antiseptic, and he didn't make a sound, just watched her face with an intensity that made her hands tremble. You've done this before, he observed. My brother was a boxer. I learned to stitch cuts when he couldn't afford the ER. Past tense, he died 3 years ago. She said it flat, factual, because grief that old had worn smooth like river stones. Minho was quiet for a moment, then his hand caught her wrist, gentle but firm. I'm sorry. Amara looked down at where his fingers wrapped around her skin, warm and wet from the bath. You don't know me well enough to be sorry. I know what it's like to lose someone who mattered. His thumb brushed across her pulse point, and she felt the touch everywhere. I know what it's like to be alone in a city that doesn't care if you disappear. The bathroom felt smaller suddenly. Steam curled between them, and Amara was acutely aware of how close they were, how bare he was beneath the water, how her uniform was getting damp from leaning over the tub. Tell me about the person who did this, she said, needing to break whatever was building in the air between them. Why? Because if they come back, I need to know if I should run. Minho's expression darkened. They won't come back, not for you. How do you know? Because anyone who touches you answers to me now. The words were possessive, absolute, and completely insane. Amara pulled her hand back. You don't own me because you paid me. No, he agreed, but I'm going to protect you anyway. I don't need protection. Everyone needs protection, they just don't always know from what. He shifted in the water, and Amara caught sight of another scar, this one old and brutal, running along his ribs. The world I live in doesn't forgive witnesses. You saw me bleeding. You know I'm vulnerable. That makes you a liability. Fear spiked cold through her chest. Then why bring me here at all? Because I'm tired of only trusting people who want me dead. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. Amara stared at him, this beautiful, dangerous man who looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for years, and felt something crack open inside her chest. Finish the wound, she said quietly. Then we'll talk about what happens next. What happened next was Amara spending 2 hours in a penthouse that felt like a fortress, cleaning and bandaging a man who flinched at gentle touches like he'd forgotten what kindness felt like. Minho talked while she worked, his voice low and careful, telling her things he probably shouldn't. About his father who'd built an empire on fear, about enemies who circled like sharks, about the weight of a legacy he'd never wanted but couldn't escape. Amara listened and said little because listening was safe, and talking meant revealing pieces of herself she'd buried deep. But when she finished and started to clean up, Minho caught her hand again. Stay, he said, not a command this time, a request. That wasn't part of the deal. I'll pay you. I don't want your money for that. His eyes searched hers. Then what do you want? Everything, she thought. Nothing, safety, connection, to stop running, to matter to someone again, but she said none of that. Instead, she pulled her hand free and stepped back. I want to go home before my roommates report me missing. Something like disappointment crossed his face, but he nodded. I'll have my driver take you. I can take the subway. Amara. The way he said her name, soft and firm at once, made her stop. Let me do this one thing. Please. The driver was silent and efficient, and Amara spent the ride staring out the window, watching Soul blur past in neon and shadow. Her phone buzzed. A notification from her bank. $15,000 deposited. Triple plus extra. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt tethered, like Minho had just bought more than her silence, like he'd bought a piece of her future. The next morning, flowers arrived at her apartment. Not roses, but something else, delicate white blooms she didn't recognize. The card read simply, "Thank you for your hands." No signature, but she knew. Her roommates squealed and demanded details, but Amara just smiled and said it was a client tip, nothing more. She threw herself into work, picking up extra shifts, avoiding the Zenith Tower. But 3 days later, her supervisor called her into the office with a strange expression. "You've been requested," she said. "Personally. By a VIP client. He's offering triple rate for exclusive service." Amara's stomach dropped. Who? But she already knew. Kang Min-ho, penthouse level. Her supervisor's voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you know who he is?" "No," the lie came easy. "He's dangerous, connected, the kind of man you don't say no to." The supervisor hesitated. "But he's also the kind of man who could change your life. The pay is too good to refuse. And honestly, Amara, your visa situation, this could solve everything." That evening, Amara stood outside Minho's penthouse door, heart hammering, finger hovering over the doorbell. She dressed carefully, clean jeans and a simple black top, her curls loose around her shoulders because something stubborn in her refused to hide. The door opened before she could ring. Minho stood there in casual clothes this time, black joggers and a fitted t-shirt that showed off the tattoos on his arms. His shoulder was bandaged beneath the fabric, and his expression when he saw her was relief mixed with something darker. "You came," he said. "You didn't give me much choice. You always have a choice." He stepped aside. "But I'm glad you chose this." Amara walked past him into the apartment, and the door closed behind her with a finality that felt like sealing a deal with the devil. "I don't need a cleaner," Minho said from behind her. "I need company." She turned slowly. "You're paying me triple rate for company? I'm paying you to stay, to talk, to be here without fear." He moved closer, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat of him. "Everyone in my life wants something. Power, money, protection, access. You wanted to help me when I was bleeding. That's rare. I wanted the money. You wanted to help first. The money was an excuse." He was right, and that terrified her. Amara wrapped her arms around herself. "What do you want from me, Minho?" "Everything," he said simply. "But I'll settle for tonight." That night turned into 3 nights a week, then 5. Within 2 weeks, Amara had a routine that felt dangerous and inevitable. She'd finish her day shifts, shower, change, and take the private elevator up to a penthouse that was slowly starting to feel familiar. Minho never touched her inappropriately, never pushed, but his attention was constant and overwhelming. He asked about her life, her dreams, her fears. He ordered food from expensive restaurants and watched her eat like it mattered that she was fed. He had clothes delivered in her size, casual things, so she'd be comfortable. And he talked about his world carefully, in ways that gave her enough to understand without implicating her, about loneliness that came from being untouchable, about wanting something real in a life built on lies. Amara tried to keep distance, tried to remember this was transactional, but Minho made it impossible. The way he looked at her, like she was sunlight and he'd been living in darkness. The way he listened when she talked about her brother, about the scandal that destroyed her family, about running to Seoul to escape a man who'd used her and thrown her away. The way he said, "He's a fool, and if he ever comes near you, I'll make sure he regrets being born." It should have scared her. Instead, it made her feel protected for the first time in years. 1 month in, everything changed. Amara arrived to find Minho packing his living room, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Korean that sounded like threats. He looked up when she entered, and his expression shifted immediately. Relief, need, something almost desperate. He ended the call and crossed to her in 3 strides. "Bad day?" she asked carefully. "Complicated day." His hands flexed at his sides like he wanted to reach for her but was holding back. I need you to do something for me." "What?" "Let me hold you." The request was so raw, so vulnerable that Amara's breath caught. "Minho, please, just for a minute. I need to remember what it feels like to touch something that isn't violence. She should have said no, should have maintained the professional distance that was already crumbling. But he looked shattered, and she'd spent too many nights listening to him talk about the weight he carried alone. Amara stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Minho made a sound, something between a gasp and a sigh, and pulled her close. His face buried in her hair, his body trembling slightly, and Amara felt the exact moment he let himself break. They stood like that for 5 minutes. 10. He didn't speak, just held her like she was an anchor in a storm, and she let him because somewhere along the way he'd become something more than a client, more than a dangerous man paying for her time. He'd become someone she cared about. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were wet. "Thank you," he whispered. "What happened today? I had to make a choice between what's right and what's necessary." His thumb brushed her cheek, and she realized she was crying too. "I chose necessary, I always do. But it costs pieces of my soul every time." "Then stop," she said. "Find another way. There is no other way, not in my world." "Then leave your world." Minho smiled sadly. "I can't, but you make me wish I could." That night he asked her to stay longer, then longer still. They talked until 3 in the morning, sitting on his couch with the city glittering below them, and somewhere in those hours his hand found hers and didn't let go. When Amara finally left, Minho walked her to the elevator. "I'm falling for you," he said quietly, the doors open and waiting. "I know I shouldn't, I know this complicates everything, but I need you to know." Amara's heart hammered. "Minho, this can't, we can't." "I know." He stepped closer, his hand cupping her face. "But I'm done pretending I don't feel it. I'm done pretending you're just someone I hired. You're everything, Amara, and I'm terrified of what that means. It means you're going to get hurt. I've been hurt before, this is different." His forehead pressed to hers. "This is the kind of pain I'd choose." The elevator started to close. Amara stepped inside, and Minho let her go, but his eyes held hers until the doors shut completely. She rode down alone, shaking, knowing that everything had just changed and there was no going back. The next week, jealousy entered the equation. Amara was leaving a coffee shop near her apartment when she ran into Marcus, an American teacher she'd met at a language exchange months ago. He was friendly, harmless, and clearly interested. They talked for 10 minutes, exchanged numbers, and made vague plans to meet up. Amara thought nothing of it until that evening when she arrived at Minho's penthouse to find him standing by the window, posture rigid, phone in hand. "Who is he?" Minho's voice was cold. Amara froze. "What?" He turned, and his expression was fury barely controlled. "The man you were with today, coffee shop on Idiwan Street, who is he?" Ice slid down her spine. "You're having me followed. I'm keeping you safe." "That's not an answer." "He touched your arm, you smiled at him, you gave him your number." Minho's hands clenched. "Who is he?" Anger flared hot in Amara's chest. "A friend, not that it's any of your business." "Everything about you is my business." "No," she snapped. "You don't own me, Minho. You pay me to keep you company, not to report my every move." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. He crossed the room in 3 strides and stopped inches from her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. "You think this is about ownership?" His voice dropped to something rough and raw. "You think I'm watching you because I'm possessive, aren't you? I'm watching you because the moment you walked into my life, you became a target. Every enemy I have will look for weaknesses. And you, Amara, you're the biggest weakness I've ever had." The confession hung between them, heavy and terrifying. Amara's breath came faster. "Then let me go, fire me, send me away." "I can't." His hand came up, fingers threading through her hair. "I've tried. I've spent every night telling myself to end this before it destroys us both. But then you walk in and I breathe again. You're my oxygen, and I'd rather suffocate than lose you. Minho, tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me I'm alone in this." He was so close now she could feel his breath on her lips. "Tell me to stop, and I will." She couldn't. God help her, she couldn't, because he was right. Somewhere between bathing his wounds and listening to his confessions and letting him hold her like she was precious, she'd fallen too. Fallen for a man who lived in shadows and violence, who looked at her like she was light-made flesh, who would burn the world down to keep her safe. "I feel it," she whispered. "I'm terrified, but I feel it." Minho's control shattered. He kissed her like a man starving, like she was air and he'd been drowning, and Amara kissed him back with everything she'd been holding in for weeks. Desire, fear, need, all of it pouring out in the press of lips and the tangle of tongues, and the way his hands gripped her waist like he'd never let go. They stumbled backward, kissing frantically, desperately. Minho's back hit the wall and he reversed them, lifting her easily, her legs wrapping around him instinctively. "Tell me to stop," he gasped against her mouth. "Tell me this is wrong. It is wrong." Her hands were in his hair, pulling him closer. "We shouldn't." "I know." He carried her toward the bedroom, and everything blurred into heat and need and the feel of skin on skin, barriers falling away, hearts beating in sync. The world outside disappeared, and there was only them, only this, only the desperate claiming of two people who'd been alone too long. When it was over, when they lay tangled together in sheets that smelled like expensive detergent and new beginnings, Amara felt fear creep back in. This changed everything. This made it real. This meant she'd crossed a line she could never uncross. Minho's arms tightened around her like he could feel her pulling away. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't run from this. What are we doing?" Her voice cracked. "What is this? This is me choosing you. This is me being selfish for the first time in my life." He turned her to face him, eyes fierce and tender at once. "I know I'm dangerous. I know my world will try to destroy you. But I swear, Amara, I will protect you with everything I have. You're mine now, and I don't let go of what's mine." Possessiveness should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like the safest promise anyone had ever made. Amara touched his face, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "What if I hurt you?" "Then I'll survive it. I've survived worse." His lips brushed her forehead. "But please don't leave, not tonight." She stayed. She stayed through the night and into the morning, and when dawn broke over Seoul, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Amara woke in Minho's arms and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope, but hope in Minho's world came with a price, and that price was about to come due. The threat came 3 days later in the form of photographs slipped under Amara's apartment door. She found them when she came home from a morning shift, exhausted and thinking about Minho's text from an hour earlier asking when she'd come over. The envelope was plain, unmarked, and the moment she opened it, her world tilted sideways. Photos of her and Minho, leaving his building, in his car. Through his penthouse windows, kissing, intimate, exposed. The final photo was her face circled in red with Korean text she couldn't read, but the meaning was clear enough. Target acquired. Amara's hands shook so badly she dropped the photos. Her phone rang immediately like whoever sent them was watching, waiting. Unknown number, she almost didn't answer. "Hello, Amara Winston." The voice was male, Korean accent thick, tone pleasant in a way that felt like poison. "You've made an interesting choice getting involved with Kang Minho." Her blood went cold. "Who is this?" "Someone who wants to offer you a way out before this ends badly." The man paused. "Minho has many enemies. You've become a liability to him, a weakness. Walk away now, leave Seoul, and you'll be compensated generously for your discretion." "And if I don't? Then you'll discover exactly how dangerous love can be in our world." The line went dead. Amara stood frozen in her tiny apartment, photos scattered at her feet, fear climbing up her throat like bile. She should call Minho, should tell him immediately. But another part of her, the part that had survived scandal and betrayal before, whispered that maybe the voice was right. Maybe loving Minho was a death sentence she was too blind to see coming. She didn't go to his penthouse that night. She texted an excuse about feeling sick and ignored his concerned responses. But Minho knew her too well now, knew when she was lying, and by midnight he was at her door. Amara opened it to find him standing in the hallway, still in his suit from whatever business he'd been conducting, eyes dark with worry and something harder. Anger. "Let me in," he said quietly. It wasn't a request. She stepped aside and Minho entered, his gaze sweeping the small space, landing immediately on the photos still scattered across her floor. He went very still, that terrifying stillness that preceded violence. "When did these arrive?" His voice was deadly calm. "This morning. And you didn't call me." It wasn't a question. I didn't know what to say. Amara wrapped her arms around herself. "A man called, said I should leave Seoul, said I'm a liability to you." Minho's jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind. He pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke rapid Korean that sounded like orders being given to soldiers. When he hung up, he turned to her with eyes blazing. "Pack a bag, you're coming with me." "Minho, I can't just—" "Now, Amara, this isn't a discussion." 20 minutes later, she was in his car, a bag hastily packed, being driven through Seoul's nighttime streets with Minho beside her, one hand gripping hers like a lifeline, the other scrolling through his phone with deadly focus. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere they won't find you until I've handled this." "Handled what exactly? Who are they?" Minho looked at her then, and she saw fear beneath the fury. Real, raw fear. Rival family. "They've been trying to undermine my organization for months. I knew they'd eventually come after me personally, but I thought I had more time before they identified you. So this is my fault, for being with you." "No," his grip tightened. "This is my fault for not protecting you better, for being selfish enough to keep you close when I should have sent you away." Amara's throat burned. "Do you want to send me away now?" I want to lock you somewhere safe and hunt down every person who dared to threaten you. I want to make them understand that touching you means death." His voice dropped to something almost broken. "But what I want doesn't matter. What keeps you alive matters. I'm not leaving you. You might not have a choice." The safe house was in Gangnam, a luxury apartment building with security that looked military grade. Min-ho's men were already there, positioned at every entrance, eyes sharp and weapons concealed but present. Inside, the apartment was sterile, impersonal, nothing like Min-ho's penthouse. He set her bag down and immediately went to the windows, checking sight lines, exits, vulnerabilities. "You'll stay here until this is resolved," he said without turning around. "How long will that take?" "Days. Maybe weeks." He finally faced her. "I'm leaving guards. You don't go out, you don't contact anyone, you stay invisible." Amara's chest tightened with anger and fear mixed together. "So I'm a prisoner now. You're protected, there's a difference." "Is there?" She moved closer. "Because from where I'm standing, this feels like you making decisions for me, just like every other man who's controlled my life." Something cracked in Min-ho's expression. He crossed to her in 2 strides, hands framing her face, eyes desperate. "I'm not controlling you. I'm trying to keep you alive. Do you understand? If they take you, if they hurt you to get to me, I will burn this entire city down and I won't stop until everyone responsible is dead or I am. That's not control, Amara. That's terror." The confession broke her anger apart. She saw him clearly then, this powerful, dangerous man reduced to fear by the thought of losing her, and she understood finally what she meant to him, what they meant to each other. "Then don't leave me here alone," she whispered. "Stay, even just tonight." Min-ho closed his eyes briefly, fighting himself. "If I stay, I won't be able to focus on fixing this. If you leave, I'll fall apart." That decided it. Min-ho pulled her close, and they stood there in the sterile apartment, holding each other like the world was ending, because in a way it was. The fragile peace they'd built was shattering, and both of them knew it. That night, they barely slept. Min-ho made calls in Korean, packing the apartment, his voice alternating between cold command and barely controlled rage. Amara sat on the couch, watching him, memorizing the way he moved, the fierce protectiveness in every word, the love that drove his fury. When he finally hung up and came back to her, exhaustion lined his face. "It's done for now." "What's done?" "I've sent a message, made it clear what happens to anyone who touches you." He sat beside her, pulling her into his lap. "But this won't end quietly, Amara. War is coming and you're the reason. Then let me go, end this before it starts." "I can't." His voice broke. "I've tried to imagine it, sending you away, watching you disappear. I can't survive it. You're in my blood now, and I'd rather die protecting you than live without you." Amara turned to face him fully, straddling his lap, hands in his hair. "Then we fight together. You don't get to protect me by pushing me away. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand exactly what I'm asking. I'm asking you to trust me, to let me stand beside you instead of hiding me away." She kissed him fiercely. "I'm not fragile, Min-ho. I survived losing everything once. I can survive this if you stop trying to do it alone." Something shifted in his eyes. Resignation, maybe, or acceptance. He kissed her back with everything he'd been holding in, desperation and need and love all tangled together, and they fell into each other again, seeking comfort in touch, in heat, in the temporary escape of bodies joined and hearts beating in sync. Afterward, wrapped in sheets with dawn approaching, Min-ho whispered against her hair, "If anything happens to me, there's a number in my phone. Contact them. They'll get you out of Korea safely. Nothing's going to happen to you. Promise me anyway." Amara promised, even though the words tasted like ash. The attack came 2 days later, and it didn't target Min-ho. It targeted her. Amara was in the safe house kitchen making coffee when the power went out. The guards reacted immediately, voices sharp through the darkness, but before she could process what was happening, someone grabbed her from behind. A hand clamped over her mouth, an arm around her waist, and she was being dragged toward the service entrance. Training from self-defense classes, her brother had insisted on kicked in. Amara bit down hard, stomped backward, threw her elbow into ribs. The man cursed in Korean but didn't let go. Then gunfire erupted. Sharp cracks that made her ears ring. The arm around her loosened and she was falling, hitting the floor hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. When she looked up, Min-ho's head guard stood over her, gun still raised. The man who'd grabbed her crumpled and bleeding on the floor. "Are you hurt?" the guard asked in accented English. Amara shook her head, unable to speak. "Come, now, we move." He pulled her up and they ran, more guards appearing, forming a protective circle around her as they rushed toward an exit she didn't know existed. Outside, a car waited, engine running. They shoved her inside, and the vehicle peeled away from the building with tires screaming. Amara's hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Where's Min-ho?" "Coming, he's handling the rest." But the guard's expression said it wasn't that simple. The safe house had been compromised. Someone inside Min-ho's organization had betrayed him, and now everything was falling apart. They took her to another location, this one outside Seoul proper, a traditional hanok house surrounded by walls and more armed men. Min-ho arrived 3 hours later, and the moment Amara saw him, she burst into tears. He crossed to her immediately, pulling her into his arms, his body shaking as much as hers. "You're okay, you're safe, I've got you." But his voice was raw with barely controlled rage. "They got inside, someone I trusted sold us out. Who? I'm finding out, and when I do," he stopped, jaw clenched. "This ends tonight, one way or another." Fear spiked through her. "What are you going to do?" Min-ho pulled back, looking at her with eyes that held too much darkness. "What I should have done weeks ago. Eliminate the threat completely. That means killing people. Yes. No hesitation, no apology, just cold truth. Min-ho, you can't." "I can and I will. They tried to take you. They crossed the only line that matters." His hands cupped her face. "I told you I'd burn the world down for you. Tonight you'll see I meant it." He left before she could argue, taking most of his men with him, leaving only a skeleton crew to guard her. Amara paced the hanok house like a caged animal, watching the sun set over mountains she couldn't name, fear eating her alive. Hours passed. Her phone had been taken for security, so she had no way to contact anyone, no way to know if Min-ho was alive or dead, winning or losing. Around midnight, the remaining guards got a call. One of them approached her carefully. "It's done. Boss says to bring you home. Is he hurt? He's waiting for you." That wasn't an answer, but it was all she'd get. The drive back to Seoul felt endless. They didn't take her to the safe house or Min-ho's penthouse, but to a private hospital, the kind that didn't ask questions and treated people who couldn't go to public facilities. Amara's heart stopped. He's hurt. He's alive. That's what matters. Min-ho was in a private room, sitting on an exam table while a doctor stitched a gash on his arm. His shirt was torn and bloody, his face bruised, but his eyes when they found hers were fierce and relieved. "Out," he told the doctor. "I'm not finished. Out now." The doctor left, clearly used to not arguing. Amara stood frozen in the doorway until Min-ho held out his uninjured hand. "Come here." She went, crossing the room on shaking legs, and the moment she was close enough, Min-ho pulled her between his legs, burying his face against her stomach. "It's over," he said roughly. "The rival family, the leak, all of it, done." "How many people died tonight?" she had to ask, had to know what he'd become for her. "Enough that no one will threaten you again." He looked up, eyes dark but clear. "I'm not sorry, I'd do it again, I'd do worse." Amara should have been horrified, should have run from the violence he'd committed in her name. But all she felt was exhausted relief that he was alive, that they'd survived, that the nightmare was finally over. "I thought I lost you," she whispered. "Never, I'll crawl back from hell itself before I leave you." He stood, wincing, and kissed her with split lips in desperation. "Marry me." The words knocked the air from her lungs. "What? Marry me? Tonight, tomorrow, whenever you're ready. Make this real, make it permanent." His hands shook as they framed her face. "I know it's insane. I know I'm covered in blood and this is the worst possible time, but I can't wait anymore. I need you to be mine in every way that matters." Amara's mind reeled. "Min-ho, we barely know each other. This is too fast, too. I know everything that matters. I know you're brave and kind and strong enough to stand in my world without breaking. I know you see me, all of me, and don't run. I know I love you more than I've ever loved anything." His voice cracked. "And I know life is too short and too dangerous to waste time pretending we're not meant for this." Tears streamed down her face. "You're asking me to marry a man who just killed people. I'm asking you to marry a man who would kill anyone who threatens his family. And you're my family now, Amara, the only family that matters." The truth of it settled in her bones. This man, this dangerous, beautiful, broken man, loved her with a ferocity that rewrote everything she thought she knew about safety and risk. "Yes," she heard herself say. "Yes, I'll marry you." Min-ho's expression shattered into something raw and relieved. He kissed her desperately, tasting like copper and promises, and Amara kissed him back, choosing him fully, choosing this life, choosing love over fear. They married 2 weeks later in a small private ceremony with only Min-ho's most trusted people present. Amara wore a simple white dress, nothing fancy, nothing that drew attention. Min-ho wore a black suit and looked at her like she'd hung the moon. When he slid the ring on her finger, his hands shook. "You're mine now," he whispered. "Legally, completely, forever." "And you're mine," she replied. "Don't forget that part." His smile was fierce and tender at once. "Never." The reception was quiet, intimate, nothing like the grand affairs Minho's status would normally demand. But he didn't care about status anymore. He cared about the woman beside him, the life they were building, the future that felt possible for the first time in years. That night in his penthouse that was now hers too, Minho carried her to bed and made love to her with a reverence that stole her breath. "My wife," he kept whispering against her skin. "My heart, my everything." Amara held him close and felt truly safe for the first time since arriving in Seoul. The months that followed were an adjustment. Amara learned to navigate Minho's world, the careful politics, the dangerous men who showed him respect, the weight of being married to someone powerful. She also learned about his legitimate businesses, the ones that didn't involve violence, and slowly started helping him transition away from the darker parts of his empire. "I want our children to inherit something clean," he told her one night. "I want them to have choices I never did." The mention of children made her heart skip, but she didn't say anything. Not yet. 3 months after the wedding, Amara woke up nauseous for the 5th morning in a row. She took a test in their bathroom while Minho was in a meeting downstairs, and when the 2 lines appeared, she sat on the marble floor and cried. Not from fear. From joy. From the overwhelming realization that she was building a life with a man who'd fought through hell to protect her, and now they were creating something new together. When Minho came looking for her an hour later, he found her still sitting there, test in hand, tears on her face. He went very still. "Amara!" She looked up at him, this fierce, dangerous man who'd chosen her over everything, and smiled through her tears. "I'm pregnant." For 3 full seconds, Minho didn't move. Then his knees buckled and he dropped beside her, hands shaking as he took the test, staring at it like it held the secrets of the universe. "You're sure?" "The test is positive." "I have a doctor's appointment next week to confirm, but yes, I'm sure." Minho's breath left him in a rush. He set the test down carefully and pulled her into his lap, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, and when he spoke, his voice was wrecked with emotion. "I never thought I'd have this, a family, love, something worth more than power." He pulled back to look at her, eyes wet with tears he didn't bother hiding. "You gave me everything, Amara, everything I didn't know I needed." "We gave each other everything," she corrected gently, touching his face. "This is ours, Minho, all of it." They sat together on the bathroom floor of their penthouse, holding each other while Seoul glittered beyond the windows, and for the first time in both their lives, the future looked bright instead of terrifying. Minho kept his promise. He transitioned out of the dangerous parts of his business, focusing on legitimate enterprises, building something their child could be proud of. There were threats still, men who didn't like change, but Minho handled them with the same ruthless efficiency he'd always had, just cleaner now, legal. Amara's pregnancy progressed smoothly. Minho was obsessive about her health, her safety, her happiness. He attended every doctor's appointment, read every book on parenting, and talked to their growing baby every night like the child could already hear him. "Your mother saved me," he'd whisper against her belly. "She walked into my life when I was drowning and taught me how to breathe again. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure she never regrets choosing me." Amara would run her fingers through his hair and think about how far they'd come. From a desperate transaction in a bathroom to this, to marriage and pregnancy, and a love that had survived violence and fear, and every attempt to tear them apart. The baby came on a spring morning when cherry blossoms were blooming across Seoul. Labor was long and hard, and Minho never left her side, holding her hand, whispering encouragement, looking more terrified than she'd ever seen him. When their daughter finally arrived, tiny and perfect and screaming with healthy lungs, Minho cried openly. The doctors placed her in his arms, and he stared down at her with an expression of such pure awe that Amara fell in love with him all over again. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She looks like you. She has your eyes." Amara smiled tiredly, dark and intense. "What should we name her?" They discussed names for weeks without deciding, but now, looking at their daughter's face, Amara knew. "Mina, it means love in Korean, right?" Minho nodded, unable to speak, tears streaming down his face as he looked between his wife and his daughter, his family, his heart, his entire world. "Mina," he agreed. "Perfect." That night, with Amara sleeping and baby Mina in his arms, Minho stood by the hospital window watching the city wake up to a new day. He thought about the man he'd been before Amara, cold and violent and alone, ruling an empire that felt more like a prison. Then he looked down at his daughter, at his sleeping wife, at the family he'd built from ashes and blood and desperate love, and knew he'd made the right choice. Power meant nothing without someone to share it with. Fear meant nothing when you had something worth protecting. And violence, all that violence he'd committed and survived, had led him here to this moment, to this peace. I'll protect you both, he whispered to Mina. Always, no matter what it costs. The baby made a small sound, her tiny hand gripping his finger, and Minho felt his heart crack open completely, rebuilt by love into something new. Outside, Seoul moved on, indifferent and vast. But in that hospital room, a former maid and a reformed criminal held their daughter and dreamed of futures that didn't include fear. And for the first time in their lives, those dreams felt possible. 5 years later, Minho sat in his office overlooking the Han River, reviewing contracts for his latest legitimate business venture. His phone buzzed with a message from Amara, a photo of Mina at kindergarten, grinning with missing front teeth, holding a drawing she'd made. The caption read, "She says this is Daddy fighting dragons to protect us. Very accurate." Minho smiled, saved the photo, and felt gratitude so intense it physically hurt. He'd started as a man who knew only violence, who'd built an empire on fear, who'd believed love was weakness. Then a woman with kind hands had walked into his life offering warmth in the middle of his coldest moment, and everything had changed. He'd killed for her, nearly died for her. Burned his old life down and rebuilt it into something clean. And he'd do it all again without hesitation, because love wasn't weakness. Love was the only thing worth fighting for. His phone rang. Amara, he answered immediately. "Hey, beautiful. Hey yourself, Mina wants to know if you're coming to her recital tonight." "I wouldn't miss it." "Good, because your daughter informed me that if you don't come, she's firing you as her dad." Minho laughed, the sound free and genuine. "Tell her I'll be there with flowers." "She wants chocolate. Chocolate and flowers, anything else. Just you, that's all we ever need." Minho closed his eyes, breathing in the peace of that truth. "I love you, Amara, more than anything." "I know, I love you too." After they hung up, Minho packed up his office and headed home early, stopping to buy flowers and chocolate, driving through Seoul streets that no longer felt like a battlefield. When he arrived at their house, a real house now with a yard and neighbors and normalcy, Amara was in the kitchen cooking while Mina practiced her dance routine in the living room. They both looked up when he entered, faces lighting up with joy, and ran to him. Minho caught them both, holding his entire world in his arms, and thought about that first night. The scalding water, the $5,000, the desperate command that had changed everything. He'd asked her to bathe his wounds. She'd healed his soul instead, and in return he'd given her everything. His protection, his name, his heart, his life. It was the best deal he'd ever made, the only deal that mattered. And as he stood in his home with his wife and daughter wrapped around him, Minho finally understood what his father had died trying to protect. Love was worth any price, any sacrifice, any war, and he'd won his. The end. Thank you for reading this story about Kang Minho and Amara, two broken people who found healing in each other's arms and built a family from ashes and blood and desperate, protective love. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to Story World for more emotional, intense, dark romance stories that will keep you up all night. Drop a comment telling us what you thought about Minho and Amara's journey, and let us know what kind of story you want to see next. Until next time, besties, remember that sometimes the most dangerous love stories have the happiest endings.